Welcome to Fan Fave with Katrina. Fan Fave with Katrina. It's time to talk pop culture.
It's a great day because you're listening to Fan Fave. I'm Katrina, and this week we are going to be talking about TV reboots. But before getting into that, I want to do a quick pop recap talking about every pop culture thing that I have just not been able to stop talking about since the last time I spoke to you on this podcast. Let's start with music. I still have Beyonce's Renaissance on repeat. It is just bop after bop. It's truly a summer album and every song is amazing. Like Alien Superstar, Cuff It, America Has a Problem, and those are just my top 3. Of course, I'm also streaming Harry's House, the latest album by Harry Styles. I'm still trying to get that cinema bridge right for when I go to see Harry at Madison Square Garden. That's right, the Garden is Harry's house for the next 2 months, so that's so exciting. I'll be at a couple of the shows, so make sure you're following at FanFave Media on all social media platforms for all of the fun content I will be posting up from there in September. As for what I'm watching, currently still very into The Resort on Peacock, we also have a new Marvel show, which is exciting. It was one of my most anticipated shows since its announcement, and it's really fun. I'm loving the comedy aspect of it, as it's technically Marvel's first real comedy. I'm also still in the process of watching Glee for the first time ever, so that is interesting. But I'm on season 2 right now, and I'm thinking maybe in the future I should do an episode where I just talk about my journey experiencing Glee for the first time in 2022, because that show is just crazy. The summer blockbuster season is dying down, but a lot of exciting new stuff has been coming out on streaming, so you can head to social media for my opinions on all that kind of stuff. Those are my favorite things right now, but reach out to me on social media because I would love to hear what you are fans of right now. Now, let's get into the topic of today, TV reboots and revivals. I feel like shows and movies are always being rebooted, but more recently, there have been a lot of reboots on beloved shows of mine, and a lot of these reboots of shows that my generation, Generation Z, know and love. So I wanted to have this conversation about the modern TV reboot, and we are going to be talking all about reboots from the last year that are currently on the air or recently premiered, and I'll be breaking these shows down to determine what really makes a good reboot, and if they can ever truly live up to the hype that their original series had. In doing so, we will also be hearing from fans of these shows that I surveyed to get a sense of their overall opinions. So let's get into it. I want to start by quickly going over the difference between reboots and revivals. You might find me using them interchangeably throughout, however, revivals are typically what they sound like. They bring back the same cast for the most part and usually pick up where they left off, reviving the old stories. Whereas reboots are a complete and fresh start, typically with an all-new cast and story with the same or very similar backbone as the original show. Before I jump into talking about specific shows, I want to talk a little bit about the general reception of reboots. I feel like in general, before a reboot even comes out, unless there's a great writer or cast or director or anyone that has proven they are capable of bringing a good name to the show attached to it, people tend to say that it's going to be bad before it even comes out. It's the idea that the original is always better. You can't just capture the magic of what worked that first time, and over the years there have been many reboots that upset people because it just wasn't done right. It's not a great feeling to see your favorite show or movie be brought back and then feel like you're watching a piece of art get ruined. I'm just gonna give a quick movie example. We all know Ghostbusters, the classic 80s franchise. In 2016, a gender-swapped Ghostbusters film was released with a cast filled with stars from SNL and Chris Hemsworth. At its face, it sounds like it may not be too bad, but it was met with poor reviews. When messing with something so classic, so well received for decades, you have to be careful to pay homage to the original story while presenting something new that will still be appreciated by the oh-so dedicated and passionate fans of the franchise. Now, I don't think 2021's Ghostbusters Afterlife was a perfect movie, but I was in the room at New York Comic Con back in September when the cast surprised us all in the audience with being the first group of fans to watch the movie over a month before its official release. The energy in the room was electric. Every little tease or Easter egg that was a throwback to the original films was met with cheers. Unlike the 2016 reboot, it felt like it was in the same world as the original. It followed the same continuity. It was really more of a sequel or a revival rather than a full-on reboot. It brought back Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and honored Harold Ramis in a touching way as well. Even Gozer made a comeback. It did all of this while still offering something fresh, with the story of a new generation of Ghostbusters led by rising star McKenna Grace. It was flooded with fan service that made everyone get so excited, and while sometimes fan service can be too much, it might just be what's necessary to at least get the ground running on a follow-up to something so major and important to people. Now, unlike Ghostbusters, most of the shows that I'm going to focus on today are reboots of shows that have not been around for decades. They don't all have that classic value and are actually somewhat modern to begin with. They do, however, carry a feeling of nostalgia along with them, as they are shows that a lot of people in my generation at least grew up watching. The first show I want to talk about is Gossip Girl. The Gossip Girl reboot that aired in 2021 was a reimagining of the original Gossip Girl series from 2007. The reboot had hype at its first announcement because it was going to HBO Max, which meant the series could be more scandalous and gossip-filled than ever. Kristen Bell returned to voice Gossip Girl once again, which was so exciting. Twitter erupted when the new cast was first spotted on the steps of the Met as they filmed season 1. But shortly before the series premiered, a series of interviews by the creative team behind the reboot was met with skepticism about how good the show would be. For example, in Variety, showrunner Josh Safran told Variety that the kids will wrestle with their privilege in a way that the original didn't. They take Ubers, not limos, and are mostly not rude to service workers. Gossip Girl is a show about privileged teens that are rude to everyone around them that they think is lesser. Is that a bad thing to do? Yes. But that is Gossip Girl, and maybe if that feels wrong to put back on the air in the times that we are in today, then maybe we do not need a Gossip Girl reboot. Is there enough gossip in the Gossip Girl reboot? There were way too many apologies to me. It seemed like a lot of the gossip and messiness in the first season of Gossip Girl just fell flat, especially in the first half of season 1. One key thing I want to talk about with Gossip Girl is I watched Gossip Girl pretty recently. I started it in 2019 and finished the show around the end of 2020. I procrastinated because I was spoiled the reveal that Dan was Gossip Girl, and for context, I would always hear it on Twitter as a Pretty Little Liars fan, which is also a show I will be getting into later, but people would always say, this A reveal is worse than when it was revealed that Dan was Gossip Girl, and I would always be like, no, I never watched Gossip Girl because I thought the identity and reveal of who Gossip Girl was is as essential to the plot as knowing the identity of A and Pretty Little Liars. So I thought the whole show was spoiled for me, but I was wrong. So I watched Gossip Girl in like 2020, and one of the most interesting things to me was how dated it was. That late 2000s, early 2010s fashion, music, slang, lifestyle. It was almost like a time capsule. Because Gossip Girl is such a pop cultural show where they make a lot of references and they kind of do live in the real world. I mean, Lady Gaga was in an episode singing Bad Romance, for example. It's just fun to go back and watch and feel that nostalgia because I was a child in 2007, so my eyes weren't fully on that world yet. They were on Disney Channel. But anyways, it's nothing that the show creators of Gossip Girl 2021 can really change or do. It's just that I'm living in it now. You know, the Ariana Grande references and the soundtrack that could come fresh off of my Tidal playlist. It just feels like they're trying too hard to be relatable and to hit every mark with current trends. Even with one of the main characters being an influencer. Like that whole world is just a little bit too realistic, too up to date to me. I don't know if it's necessarily something that makes me say I don't like the show or that it's bad because of it, but I'm missing that element that I like so much about watching the original. One thing that I do love about the original is the way they try to integrate the characters into our world through marketing. A lot of shows and even music artists are doing these community phone line text messages where you can subscribe and they will text you, basically getting fake text messages from Gossip Girl. The Pretty Little Liars reboot also does this, and it's really cool. The Gossip Girl reboot also set up Instagram accounts for the characters of the show, which reminded me a lot of this Norwegian show I used to watch called Scam, and I really love that it's something that is happening now with the show in America, and it's a really innovative way to do marketing and connect with the fans of the show. The last point I want to discuss about the Gossip Girl reboot is the idea that the creators wanted to fix one of the biggest complaints about the original show. Everyone I know hated the reveal of Gossip Girl. In fact, even Gossip Girl himself, Penn Badgley, says it doesn't make any sense. There were rumors that Gossip Girl was originally supposed to be Serena's brother, but that got leaked, so the writers tried to change it halfway through the series. But whatever the case was, it didn't work. The Gossip Girl reboot tries to change this by doing something major, letting us know who Gossip Girl is from the jump. Now, do I like who Gossip Girl is? Not really, but that's maybe a conversation for another time. The point is they want to avoid any disappointment and errors in continuity when it comes to the identity of Gossip Girl this time around. And I think that's a smart move because, like I said, Gossip Girl doesn't really have a lot of mystery elements like a show like Pretty Little Liars. It's all about the drama, so as long as there is a Gossip Girl, it works. Now, I would like to segue into another show that may have used a similar method as the Gossip Girl reboot, How I Met Your Father. The series How I Met Your Mother was ranked as having one of the worst finales of all time by outlets like USA Today. It's notoriously bad. Part of the issue had to do with the fact that we barely get any real time between Ted and the mother, Tracy, and then she dies and Ted runs off to Robin at the end of the story. So it's just a bit of a rushed mess. How I Met Your Mother is one of my favorite shows of all time, so I can talk about it a lot. And while I personally don't dislike the consequences of the finale, I believe the execution and the entire season 9 leading up to the finale is the bigger issue. I am glad that How I Met Your Father tries to avoid this a little bit by saying up front that the father is actually a character that Sophie, the main character, has met during the story told in episode 1. Now, there is no confirmation, but this revelation made at the end of episode 1 has led to a popular fan theory that the father is actually a character we have already met, meaning throughout the show we will see the main character Sophie interact with and have storylines with who the father is, rather than it be a mysterious person whose face is not revealed until the season 8 finale and faces too little screen time and shallow storylines up through the series finale like in How I Met Your Mother. This, of course, is not confirmed, as some fans also believe that Sophie could have met the father the night the pilot episode took place, but not in a scene that we have yet seen. It may have been in passing that night or something minor, meaning it still could be a character we have not met. Now, for my overall thoughts on How I Met Your Father, I think it tries to change the pace from How I Met Your Mother, but leaves out a lot of the things to me that made How I Met Your Mother great. I don't really feel the connection to the friend group that is central in this show just yet. I feel like they each kind of split up into their respective pairs and storylines, and there isn't enough group shenanigans. I think it's one of those things where you just have to give the show some time. With How I Met Your Mother, the friend group took a while to really find its footing. I feel like it was at its best with the Robin Sparkles, Slap Bet, Lily and Marshall's wedding era of the show, and that was primarily starting in season 2. So it takes time, and I'm willing to have that patience with the How I Met Your Father reboot in that aspect. I love the young Sophie, but the older Sophie narrating the series almost comes across as unlikable. I think it's because when Bob Saget had his cuts into the dialogue in the show, it came across as this very endearing fatherly figure. And when he talked about slightly inappropriate things, he would sometimes filter it out in the story for his children, like the running joke that they were eating sandwiches when they were really smoking. He would also kind of cut in to correct something a character said, like if someone said, "This is my last time doing this thing," he would come in and be like, "It wasn't." It just always felt very cohesive, like Ted was having this conversation with his kids as he was telling the story, and I think How I Met Your Father just misses the mark there with me. I do think the biggest difference is in the tone of older Sophie, which seems pretty intentional, as she is shown on the couch drinking while telling her story to a son who seems a lot older than Ted's children, but it just doesn't work for me. And hearing from fans, I found that I was not alone in this opinion. One fan of the show reached out to say they didn't enjoy it as much when Hillary's present version would be talking to her son. It just seemed a little cheesy, but not a big deal. There are some really great callbacks in this show, though, with Marshall and Lily's apartment and Kobe Smulders returning as Robin Scherbatsky. When they said someone was returning in the finale, she was really one of the last people I would have guessed. I was so happy it was her. I think it's interesting though because the How I Met Your Mother timeline stretched well into the future. So the Robin we see in How I Met Your Father is not the Robin that has gotten back together with Ted quite yet. All in all, it's not a bad standalone show, but I feel it is a disappointing follow-up when thought of in relation to its predecessor. But I definitely plan on giving it time and tuning in to season 2. Let's hop into another teen show, Pretty Little Liars Original Sin. This is a great reboot. Now, I'm not into the whole horror, slasher, film and TV world, so this new Pretty Little Liars isn't really for me, but despite that, I fully believe it's the way that Pretty Little Liars should be presented and should have been from the start. Like Gossip Girl, Pretty Little Liars Original Sin airs on HBO Max, which allows it to dip into more mature content than when it did when it aired on Freeform, which was ABC Family at the time. By fully leaning into the horror genre, the show soars and benefits so much from it. A now has a motive. A now truly scares the girls because it's not just stalking and threats, there's action. The stakes just feel so much higher, and they do from the very start. Like, A wastes no time. I really hope this show gets renewed despite all that's going down with HBO Max right now because it has great potential, although the references to Riverdale got me a little bit nervous, but I don't think they mean anything. I do think Pretty Little Liars has a similar thing like Gossip Girl, where the original has its benefits because of nostalgia. I just miss when Pretty Little Liars Tuesdays were a whole thing. Like, if you were on social media at that time, the good days of 2013, 2014, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The way we live tweeted like every teen show, every single week. ABC Family was running things, and then you had like the Vampire Diaries and Teen Wolf, and even in the later days shows like The 100, it's just not the same anymore. Everyone would talk about these shows and it would trend #1. It was the conversation. I do think the reboot is great for still being released weekly, even if the episodes are in chunks and not one by one, because we still have time to theorize and hype on what is going on. Now, shout out to Chanel, a Pretty Little Liars fan who shared their opinion on the reboot. Chanel wrote to FanFave, "I was a huge fan of Pretty Little Liars. When I heard there was another reboot coming out, I wasn't that excited, but after seeing the trailer, I decided to give it a try. I feel like there isn't enough stuff happening in the episodes. The pilot of the original already had more plot than the first 3 episodes. I also feel like it's trying too hard to be relatable to teens. I don't know if I will watch the whole season because so far I am not really enjoying it." I think this is a pretty interesting take because I feel like a lot happened in the first 3 episodes of the reboot, but also it didn't. To me, it seemed like a lot, but when you think about it, especially in the pilot, it is primarily a lot of setup. I will say the original Pretty Little Liars was crazy to me. They did any and everything in that show to make fans unable to guess what was going on, so maybe the reboot is trying to be a little bit more tame. The finale recently aired, and no spoilers, but I have been hearing a lot of people complain that it ended in a very predictable way, but I'm not sure if it's truly predictable or if it wasn't the usual curveball fans of the original show were always used to getting. I do believe this is a good show and the perfect twist on the original Pretty Little Liars that we know. Exactly the type of reboot that adds value to its original. Now, the next couple of shows are a little bit different than the ones I have talked about so far. They do reboot content that is a little less recent, whether they be from the 80s or 90s. First, let's talk about Bel-Air, because in a way, similar to the Pretty Little Liars reboot, I find that this one shines. I mentioned a little bit earlier, but what I think makes a great reboot and what really makes a reboot worth being made and being watched is when you take what the viewers of the original show know and love, but you bring new life into it. You lean into a new tone or you change it completely, like in the case of Bel-Air. Now, with Bel-Air, this change is a lot less seamless or straightforward than with a show like Pretty Little Liars, a drama leaning into horror. Here, we take the lighthearted family comedy of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and we spin it to an adult drama, and right off the bat, from the first moments of the pilot, you can see that there is a major shift in tone. This switch up was jarring to many people. I think for me, I didn't watch too much of the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air growing up, so watching the reboot Bel-Air, it felt like I was stepping into something new, a story that I didn't have any major predetermined attachment to. I did, however, get a lot of mixed responses from fans and avid watchers of the original and the reboot. Almost everyone had excellent and positive reviews about this show, stating that the intensity threw them off in the beginning, but they love it and all cannot wait for season 2. A few talked about skepticism after watching the first trailer from the show, one user writing to FanFave that they were a bit disappointed when the tone changed when the official trailer dropped, but they did end up being satisfied with it in the end. Another fan added, as much as they love the old show, the modern version speaks to the crowd and generation of today. They love the dramatic turn of it as it lets us see a side of each character we never thought would be possible to see. I did find one fan response to be interesting. They stated, "One thing I wish this show had was a bit of comedy written in. Not like a full-blown sitcom, but with the characters maybe being a little bit less serious at times. The original had a good balance of knowing when to be funny and when to be serious. I'd love for the writers to switch that up here." I totally agree with this comment. I feel like a drama can still have lighthearted moments. I wonder if season 1 had that a little more occasionally, would that have made viewers a little bit less shocked at the massive tone switch of the show? All in all, I love the concept of Bel-Air, and it's one of my favorite reboots that I have talked about so far today. Now let's go back to the 80s. I love Cobra Kai. First off, unlike other reboots that I have talked about so far, Cobra Kai is a TV show that is a revival of a movie. This is just a really fun show. I think this is a show with constant fan service. The fact that they were able to bring back so many key players from the original Karate Kid franchise simply amazes me. I love how Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence are adults now, and we see how the effects of their time in karate led to who they became in adulthood. I think this show is filled with Easter eggs, which is so exciting, and the series also has a high success of bringing in a new audience as we now focus in on the lives of Daniel and Johnny's kids and see a new generation of Karate Kids. I feel like every time they reference something or bring in an old character, anything from the return of Kreese in the season 1 finale to Terry Silver being in season 4, and even the build up with the Ali storyline, it's just always done so well. Two funny things I find about this show. One, they're collecting Disney Channel actors like Infinity Stones. Like, there are so many familiar faces in this show. And another thing I love is how it takes who they kind of made you villainize and they make you like them. So characters you didn't like in the original Karate Kid franchise, you're now starting to sympathize with them and kind of see why they are the way they are. To be honest, watching Cobra Kai has made me like and understand Johnny Lawrence a lot more and almost dislike the uptight LaRusso. I do think the show can get a little cheesy at times, but it's a reboot that seems like everything they do is for the fans, with constant references and guest appearances, but it's also always executed very well. They have a great way of building the hype. They aren't just throwing around 5 cameos into one season. The writers have stated they have a 6-season plan for the show, and it really feels like everything is so well mapped out. I'm just so excited, counting down the days until season 5 comes out next month. Now, for the next 3 shows I want to discuss, I mainly want to do a comparison between them. The first is Raven's Home, a reboot of the Disney Channel classic, That's So Raven. The thing about Raven's Home that I want to point out is that it rebooted a children's show from the early 2000s and brought it back with the original character Raven now playing a mother to children. Raven's Home is airing on Disney Channel and catering to the same children's market that it originated with. I think Raven's Home is a great show given that the audience in mind is still kids. I think it truly shined when it made its big season 5 switch. The trailer for season 5 of Raven's Home went viral on Twitter. It gained the attention of people in my generation, people who grew up watching That's So Raven, because it brought back major elements from the original series that we weren't seeing in the Raven's Home that had started airing originally on Disney Channel. Raven moves back to San Francisco in this new season, which is where the original show takes place. I think the show should have started this way. She returns to her original house, and there are callbacks to other settings in the show. There's also a lot of changes in the cast coming in this new season, including the exit of Raven's daughter Naya and best friend Chelsea, and the return of Raven's dad as a regular in the show, and even Raven's mother, who is confirmed to return in the season 5 finale. The next show I want to add into this conversation is High School Musical, the series. So this isn't really a full-on reboot or revival, more of a project inspired by IP, and similarly to Cobra Kai, it's a show where the premise arises from a movie. It is based on the High School Musical universe, but there's this weird fine line where they aren't in the movie universe but are real life universe, and they, like us, enjoyed the High School Musical franchise as viewers. I really love this show. I don't know if it just hit at the right time, but it didn't try to be the next High School Musical, probably due to the context of the show. It's a documentary of students that attend the school where the High School Musical movie is being filmed, and they are putting on a stage production of High School Musical. I personally believe this show would have excelled as a limited series. I liked what they gave us in season 1, loved the characters, the new music, the storylines, the tone. All of that, however, went out of the window for me with season 2, and I'm not even currently up to date with the 3rd season because it just dropped in quality to me and I lost my interest for a show that I used to watch first thing in the morning when a new episode dropped each week. For it to be called High School Musical, the series, I feel like it should have only been a series that focused on their musical production of High School Musical. When you start adding in Beauty and the Beast and Frozen and Camp Rock, it just gets a little bit too much for me. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of people thought, oh, well, season 2 should be about High School Musical 2, and season 3 could be about High School Musical 3. But I actually don't think that either. I think it should have just been what it was in the first season, and only that. The second season was almost completely uneventful to me. It had a storyline with the competitor's school that they were trying to beat in a theater awards competition, which just reminded me a little bit too much of Glee, really, and then they just end up quitting in the end anyways. The soundtrack felt like a major step down for me. There are maybe 1 or 2 songs at most that I liked, and I can't even remember them. And then they also kept teasing a lot of big moments and relationship twists between the characters, and then nothing really happened. And Olivia Rodrigo's character had an odd storyline where she transferred schools for like 2 episodes but decides to come right back, which I'm guessing they didn't know she will become the major pop star that she is right now, or else they could have used that storyline as a send-off for her character, and maybe that's why it reads as such an odd thing to me since she is now only a guest star in season 3. Season 3 finds the characters at camp now. We did get some pretty cool OG Disney Channel cameos like Jason Earls, who was Jackson on Hannah Montana, and Corbin Bleu from the original High School Musical franchise. I'm also very excited about Sophia Wiley stepping up to almost be like the new star of this series after Olivia Rodrigo stepped down. Gina's storylines were always one of the more interesting parts of the show to me, so now that it's actually getting some serious spotlight, I am so happy about that. Overall, this may be an entertaining season for them, but I saw a TikTok the other day and they were talking about how confusing almost the universe of this show is. We are the viewers watching this show on Disney Plus, and we are watching the characters in this show make a documentary about putting on musicals at their school, essentially. And now in season 3, they go to this entertainment camp that is putting on a production of Frozen, and during orientation they are told, hey, the behind the scenes process of you guys putting on Frozen the musical at this camp is going to be a documentary filmed for Disney Plus. So, to recap, we are watching them make a documentary on Disney Plus of them making a documentary of them putting on their production of Frozen for Disney Plus. Now, if that confused you, I'm sorry. I'm just going to leave it with that with this show. Now, really quickly, let's discuss iCarly. I loved this show growing up, and I think that the reboot is really fun and did a great job at tying in references from the original series, with characters like Neville, for example, returning. Can I just say, wouldn't it be funny if they got Austin Butler to return as Jake, and he can sing now? I don't know why I just thought of that, but anyways, obviously Jeanette McCurdy did not return for the reboot, but I think they did a great job at being respectful of that, and Sam ending up adventuring off with a biker gang is pretty believable for her character. My biggest complaint with the show is that we lost a little bit of the sense of what iCarly was, a weekly live broadcast. It just seems like in the original, there was a goofy sketch from the live stream in like every episode, and the majority of the storylines had to do with them putting on the show. But like obviously the world of the internet has changed since the initial release of iCarly, so the 2021 version of this show follows suit and expands on Carly's life as an influencer, which is really nice. Now, I promised I had a point to make and tie together these last 3 shows I talked about: Raven's Home, the 2021 iCarly revival, and High School Musical, the series. All 3 of these reboot content that was on the air on children's television with an audience of children. Now, those children in 2003, 2006, and 2007, when those shows first premiered, they aren't children anymore. I feel like each of these reboots takes a different approach to this idea. Raven's Home decides to take the successful concept of That's So Raven and tries to recreate it for the same audience for which it initially aired. iCarly, however, takes note of this and says, hey, our fans are older now. They grew up with us. Let's bring back iCarly, but in a much more mature way, with storylines and language fitting for an adult audience. High School Musical, the series, to me, it falls somewhere in between. It definitely has more of a childish tone, but there have been instances of slightly suggestive language to the point where I'm like, oh, this could never be on Disney Channel. That's why it's on Disney Plus. When rebooting content that was initially made for children, I feel like any of this is fair game. I'm sure there aren't a ton of people my age and older watching Raven's Home, but the fact that it has lasted for 5 seasons shows they were able to find and grow a new audience, a new generation of Ravens fans. I personally also love what iCarly has done. It's really cool to watch and be able to pick up with seeing where each of the characters are in life without having to sugarcoat anything, but I'm not sure if I can ever get used to Carly using such mature language on screen. Now let's hear from another fan, Kennedy, who brings up a good point about nostalgia with watching iCarly.
One thing I will say that might not work with the iCarly reboot is that it is for the generation that watched iCarly and the people that are watching it now that it is in syndication, which is fine. I'm pretty sure they will understand it and it's still funny to them. However, living iCarly and watching it while it was on the air is just going to hit differently for the generation that watched it when it was on the air versus people that are watching it in repeats and then watching the reboot. To them, it won't feel as nostalgic as it does to the people that grew up watching iCarly.
I totally agree with this. I feel like people who just hop into the new iCarly may not understand the references, but it's like if they don't know, they just don't know. It doesn't necessarily ruin their experience, but watching the show as a kid and having this sort of build up to be able to see the return of these characters and their stories once again, it just feels more exciting, especially when it's us who grew up watching it that are now still the target audience. Now, Kennedy also talked about High School Musical, the series, and how it's able to cater to both those who watched the High School Musical franchise growing up and those who are new to the franchise.
What I love about the High School Musical, the series TV show is that it does kind of give me that East High School Musical feel that I grew up on and grew up with and grew up watching. And even though this is a complete different thing, it's not the original cast, having the original cast be there and having some other Disney Channel stars on the show as well make up for the fact that this is for the people that watched High School Musical growing up, but it's also for a new generation of people who are just discovering High School Musical as well.
I did not think people were watching High School Musical, the series, without watching the original trilogy until my 10-year-old cousin, who wasn't even born when High School Musical 3 came out, asked me if I had seen High School Musical because she watched the show and had started the movies for the first time. So now more general thoughts. First, I want to say I feel like a lot of these shows that I may sound more critical towards are not necessarily bad standalone shows. They just may not fit the frame that I expected them to or hoped they would because they already kind of had a predetermined idea or expectation in my mind. I will say one thing that pretty much all of these reboots succeed in is diversity. Bringing back a lot of these shows, we get to see the stories in new perspectives, which is so important. Whether it be more direct, like the difference between a white family living in the suburbs in the 50s and 60s with the original Wonder Years, to an African American family living during that same time in Montgomery, Alabama during the reboot, or if it's just having a diverse cast. I think that easily gives a point to each of these, because we get to see new stories get told that enhance the show and probably would have made the originals even better. Also, I've mentioned fan service a lot in this podcast episode, and I just have to say I personally love it when a show or movie that is rebooting something does this. Like, I cannot express enough how much seeing callbacks to the original just makes me excited, especially cameos. Now, really quickly, I just want to talk about some upcoming reboots I'm looking forward to. First off, HBO Max was announced to be rebooting Degrassi. That's a really exciting one, but I'm not quite sure what's going on over there in the Discovery HBO Max world, so let's hope that one didn't hit the cutting floor already. Next, Party Down. Now, not gonna lie, I have not yet watched the original of this show, but I definitely will before the reboot comes out. I was mainly drawn to this reboot because I love Adam Scott. I think he's great in everything he does, and I feel like the concept of creatives working as food caterers to make it in Hollywood and everything that has to do with that just sounds really interesting, especially since it's that single cam comedy format. It also has been announced that some great new cast members are joining the revival, including Jennifer Garner, Zoe Chow, who I loved in The After Party, and James Marsden. It's also going to be produced by Paul Rudd once again, who is one of my favorite actors, so I'm going to start hoping for a cameo from him in that show now. I also wanted to hear what you, the fans, were looking forward to in future revivals, whether it's an announced show or something that you just want to see. Let's hear from Kennedy.
A TV show reboot that I would love to see, but it will never happen, is Drake and Josh. Give me a Drake and Josh reunion, spin-off, reboot, whatever you want to call it. Give me that. I will demolish that content in a good way. I need that. That is what I need. Give me Drake and Josh, please. Another TV show that I want to be rebooted is Sweet Life of Zach and Cody, because I need to know what Zach and Cody Martin are up to now. I also need a Wizards of Waverly Place reboot because I need to know what they're doing now as like adult wizards. Like, do they have kids? Like, are there kids wizards? Like, I need to know.
I totally agree. I 100% need a Wizards of Waverly Place revival. This is my favorite Disney Channel show, and I want it iCarly style. They're all grown up. What are Alex, Max, and Justin up to? Or I'd even take like a Hannah Montana reboot where she's all grown up and it's like a drama and she's trying to navigate life as an international pop star still and everything that comes with it. I don't know. I feel like most of my reboots I would want to see are also just going to be on shows I grew up watching as a kid. I can't really think of any adult shows that I watched in the last 5 or 10 years that I think could really use a reboot right now. That's all for today. Thank you so much for listening to Fan Fave. If you loved this episode, tell your friends and look forward to the next podcast episode coming to you on September 5th, as this is a bi-weekly podcast, so expect new content right here every other Monday. If that isn't enough, stay connected with Fan Fave on all social media platforms at Fan Fave Media, where I post vlogs, film and TV reviews, and reactions and breakdowns to the latest in pop culture news. And remember, I want to hear from you, so stay tuned for upcoming opportunities to have your opinion heard right here on the Fan Fave podcast. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening.